So, how to network, salary negotiations, dealing with multiple job offers at once. We're going to kind of touch on a lot of different subjects and just a little bit at the beginning, a very tiny amount about resume, just to kind of set the stage. And then, of course, as you have questions, that'll generate a discussion. And so hopefully we can get to everything here in the next hour. I believe we can. Okay. So specifically, the topics we're going to cover, getting started, where do we begin in this process? We go to school, we get degrees, doctorates, graduate degrees, whatever they may be. And so we become experts or growing experts in that field. But as far as getting a job or how to handle life, so to speak, that's a whole different trajectory, right? That's something very different. So how do we do it? How do we get started? And then networking. If you're really extroverted, this is just what you do. And for those of us that are more introverted, how do we do it? Why do we do it? We may not want to, but why is this essential? We'll talk about that. Benefit package as well. It's not just about the pay, how are you getting paid? And what kind of benefits come with that? Maximizing your salary, how to negotiate that if that's something you're able to negotiate. Every little group can be a little different, whether it's hospitals, home health, private practice, school systems, and such. And then multiple job offers, that window where, when it rains, it pours, you might get a few job offers about at the same time. So, how to kind of negotiate through that as best that you can. So those are basic overviews of our topics. So first wanted to just touch on, to make sure everybody's on the same page, we're going to create a master resume. It's a living document. It has everything on there as far as dates, when we've worked, internships, practicums maybe, our job at Chick-fil-A. It's just best to have it all down there, because a few years from now, you go to apply to a different job, and you'll have to look back and try to, or you don't want to look back and say, what were those dates? When did I graduate college? When did I work at that particular place? What was the name of it even? When you're busy, it can get a little hazy. So this is just a living document that you just keep adding on to. Then writing a resume. Again, that's a specific skill set. Sometimes people have gone through all their education and they kind of beat themselves up because they struggle with it. What I would say is don't struggle, not for too long. Definitely make an appointment, reach out and get some assistance with that. It should not be something that you do alone. Now, many of you already have a great resume, so perfect. But if that was something you were lacking, definitely reach out for some assistance. Now, once you have your master resume completed, you're going to start to look to customize it, in other words, make a copy and go from there for each position that you would apply to. So our guide for that is looking at the job listing. What is this particular job posting asking for? And matching our answers and experience to that job posting. Because you can read a job posting and think, oh, this would be a perfect job for me. But the person who's reading your resume doesn't know you, right? And so all they know is what they can read. And so we want to just kind of tailor that and make sure that each resume list, as well as possible, mirrors what it is that they're looking for. Because the name of the game is we're just trying to get our foot in the door with this resume, this calling card, so to speak, so that they'll speak with us. And then we can hopefully delight them with our wisdom and knowledge and what all we've learned. So how hiring occurs. How does this happen specifically? How do we get jobs? So of course, we have advertised positions. So on Handshake here at UTD, employers reach out to the Career Center and say, hey, we have this position. We'd love it if students could apply. And so it gets posted. There's also Indeed, right? LinkedIn, any of those kind of sites where positions are posted. Then recruiters. So recruiters work for different companies, say for hospitals, school districts, whatnot, and that's their job, is to try to find people for the position and kind of weed them out or put them in the yes or no pile, so to speak, as far as their credentials. And that's where that resume becomes so important. That's their job. That's what they're doing. They're meeting with managers oftentimes to say, what are you looking for in this job? What kind of person are you looking for? So the recruiter is kind of the gateway at times into a specific position. So that's legitimate. That's very real. Um, Unadvertised opportunities. So this is the networking part. So let's talk about that, because that's a big component. That's, I think, where a lot of questions lie as far as how we do this. So networking. For some people, this is maybe almost a four-letter word. They hate the idea, and I get that. Um, it starts, but it doesn't need to be that daunting, right? If you're more introverted, it can start rather simply as speaking with your family and friends and former colleagues, former classmates, and just letting them know, of course, with some tact, that, hey, I'm getting ready to graduate, or I'm completing an internship, or whatever it might be, and I'm going to be looking for a new position. Just kind of wanted to touch base, let you know I'm in the market, so to speak. And it'll be up to you how much you advertise that, how wide of a net, because you might be working somewhere where it's understood you're going to be moving on and your employer is fine with that. Or it might be a situation where you don't want anybody to know other than trusted people. And so that's going to kind of dictate how widespread you let people know. But point is, just casually letting friends know and colleagues, even older classmates that you might have worked on a project with, and you still have their number, you can just text and just say, hey, just curious where you are in this trajectory, right? I'm getting ready to graduate, looking for my first job, or whatever it might be. Let me know if you hear anything, something like that. Also, networking comes through just being a part of professional organizations and attending events. Now, I know right now it's difficult because the events are difficult to have in person. But when you're attending professional organizations or events, well, then you're around a bunch of like-minded people who are in the industry and thinking the same things. And they're finding opportunities that maybe you haven't even heard of or haven't even thought of. So just getting out there and networking like that, just casually, is a great way to gain some knowledge. Then volunteering. If there are any volunteering experiences within your industry, even outside of, but mostly within your industry, that can be valuable, because anytime that you're working with people who are a part of a volunteer experience, they're very appreciative that you're there volunteering, because it's hard to get volunteers. And so they're wanting to help oftentimes and kind of not pay you back, but show you their appreciation. And so if you're a part of a volunteer event that's in your industry, well, you're linking up with people who maybe they've been doing this for 10, 15 years, right? And so they know a lot of people. So that can be very impactful. So far, any of those I think are pretty benign, right? They're not that difficult. We can kind of do that, I think, even if we're more introverted. Also, recruiters, again, recruiters will reach out to you if you are on LinkedIn. The next one, social media, LinkedIn, Facebook, and such. Having your LinkedIn page up to snuff, so to speak, having a picture on there. People like to put a name to a face. Certain industries, LinkedIn is really prevalent and powerful. Others, it's kind of somewhat lacking, but it definitely never hurts. Was anybody going to jump in with a comment? I heard an echo. I'll just pause. Okay. So LinkedIn, also the Collier Center has a Facebook page. I know Jessica had pointed that out to me. So again, it kind of keeps you connected with people, because at the end of the day, if we think about it in terms of what it is, finding a job, finding our next position, that's a full-time job oftentimes. So the more that we can kind of keep in that mindset that we're looking for a new position, we're talking with family and friends, recruiters, volunteering, events, social media, applying on LinkedIn, Indeed, all that. It's kind of on the forefront of our mind, right? Then at the very bottom, I have informational interview in all caps. So first of all, what is an informational interview? Well, it's speaking honestly with people who've been doing this for however long. It could be many years. It could be the past 6 months at a different job that you would like to potentially work at, and just asking questions such as, um, "What is a day in the life like there? Where else have you worked? What if you were in my shoes? What would you do?" Any kind of inside scoop. And the way that you typically accomplish this is it can be through friends and former colleagues who have somebody that happens to work at a place that you're interested in. And they say, "Hey, you know what? Actually, I know somebody who works at such and such, UT Southwest or wherever. Um, let me give him your email because that would be somebody you should probably speak with." Great. Then you want to have your questions ready ahead of time. LinkedIn, people will just simply link up with people who are similar to them or maybe a few years ahead of them in the process and just request, "Hey, do you have a few minutes to meet virtually? You happen to be in the same industry as me and I have a few questions. I'm going to be a new graduate." So gathering information like that, because you never know what you're going to learn from speaking with somebody. Um, Leaving the end of the conversation a couple different ways. First of all, just being very appreciative that they've taken the time out of their day to speak with you. And if they've agreed to it, it's because they're the type of people that want to help others. So keep that in mind. Um, Also letting them know that definitely if you think of anything else, don't hesitate to reach out to me. Sometimes we get off the phone and then we remember something. So don't hesitate to reach out if something comes up, or also asking them if they have anyone else that they think you should speak with. And at that moment, they may not, but they might later on. And then you've kind of opened the door for them reaching out to you. The other aspect to informational interviewing that I think is really important, which we're not going to ask for, but there's a lot of potential. It often can happen this way where the person uh, that you're speaking with will say, "You know what? I think actually at my company, we might be hiring for this. Send me your resume and I'll give it to my hiring manager." Right. And that is where most jobs come from. Depending on, I think I've got some statistics in a bit, but anywhere from 70 to 90%, depending on who you believe with that, but a high percentage. So we're not asking the people in that informational interview, "Can I give you my resume? Can you give it to your manager?" But we're hoping that they might offer, right? So the idea is that the more people we speak with, the higher percentage that we can gain a job just through networking. Just one more thing that I wanted to say about that, and then we'll kind of move on a bit. Some of the people who are the best at networking, I mean, it comes natural to them. There was a lady that I worked with at Humana Insurance, and she networked all the time. She never had to look for a job ever. She always had different leadership positions because she was always meeting people, always going to lunch with people pre-COVID. And so opportunities were always falling in her lap because she was so well connected. So that may not be you. It's not me. You don't have to be, but keeping in mind that people that are really great at this don't ever have to look for work. Work comes to them. Okay, so interview preparation. So ideally, then we've gotten an interview that's coming up, and probably what's happening is we need to think about it from the interviewer's perspective and ours. So you might have applied to many places thinking, "Well, I could get on with the school district or home health or this hospital. I'm open," right? Well, to the group or the person that's interviewing you, there's only one position they're thinking about, and that's the one that they're talking with you, that they're going to speak with you about. that's the only one that's important. So keeping in mind to know the organization that you have the interview with. And I know that sounds a little goofy, but I've spoken with many employers who will, that's one of the things that they really dislike when candidates don't really know the organization they've applied to. They don't completely understand the job they've applied for. They get the sense that this candidate just needs a job and they'll take whatever. And that might be true. You might be at that stage where you just need some experience, right? That's okay, but we definitely don't want to give them that opinion that if it's not you, it'll be somebody else. We want to, really let them know that this would be something that we are interested in, right? Also, what are you worth? So what is your worth? How much money at this stage of the game can you realistically get? And we'll talk a little bit more about that, but that also comes down to networking, knowing how much people are getting in different positions. And there's other ways that we can look at it, but that's one way you might be able to find out from colleagues if you have a good enough relationship with them as far as what's expected. Also practice. So you've gone through all this schooling, you have all this knowledge, this education, maybe even experience at this point. But selling yourself is it similar to a resume? It's a different skill set, and you may or may not have that skill set. And you might think that in your mind you've got it all there. You know exactly what to tell people, and that might be the case. Then again, I meet with students, and oftentimes it's not uncommon for them to start to realize as they're actually speaking out loud that they don't sound so great. It's not coming out the way that they thought. In their mind, they were brilliant, but as they're speaking, they're getting tongue-tied, and it's just not going well. So that's okay, if you're in a practice session, that's good actually, but don't practice on your first interview, right? Because you worked hard to get that interview. So point is, at least go over it with somebody, at least a parent, a friend. If you want a more authentic view of what that's like, that's part of what we do at the University Career Center. You just set up a mock interview where you bring a job posting in your resume and we go through it. I think it's valuable. So point is, however you need to do it to prepare, practice. Don't practice on your first interview.
Alan, we have a question in the chat.
Okay.
What is an appropriate and respectful way to ask what somebody is making in order to figure out what you're worth?
Yeah. So it's tricky. I'm not going to say, so what do you get paid, right? Or what are they paying there? But I am going to kind of ask if I'm in an informational interview and just saying, well, I'm going to be graduating. Here's what I'm finding for pay range. Do you happen to know someone in my shoes what they should expect working for a hospital? And then that person, will give you their opinion, right? And they'll say, well, when I started, we got paid X amount, or I know that the people who work there get paid this range. So that's how I would approach it. I'm not asking you directly what you get paid, but just in general, what would I expect to get paid? Good question, though.
It's a good question.
I also want to make a quick comment. If you're looking in like school districts, a lot of times they're going to post the salary schedule online and it's viewable. It's just public access. You just need to search, Richardson ISD salary schedule and find out what it lists for a speech pathologist with a certain number of years of experience. And that'll tell you generally what people are making. And it may be a previous year's salary schedule, but it'll at least give you a ballpark.
Yeah, that's a good point. And and like you said, it gives you a ballpark, knowing that every year Jessica doesn't goes up at least a little bit, right?
Generally speaking, it kind of depends on, budgetary restraints and such. Is that about the same, Felicity, for hospitals?
So it's a bit variable for hospitals. I have some information for you guys on ranges if you want to talk about that now, or do you want me to?
We actually can. That's the next slide right there
Okay.
is hospitals, home health, the amount that
Mhm.
you can negotiate and pay range. So yeah, definitely, Felicity.
Okay, so you guys, so when we look at the Metroplex area in Texas in general, just I'm primarily talking about big hospital systems such as Texas Health Resources, UT Southwestern, Baylor, that sort of thing. Looking at what's the kind of the most current for a CF is anywhere from the low to the high 50s. That's a pretty big range, but it's also maybe a little bit less than you might expect, right? When Jessica discusses, right, comparing it to the schools. There's such a wide range though when you leave the state of Texas, and then some of you guys may know this already, but there's also can be an increase after your CFY year. So I just kind of wanted to give you that most recent update. Low 50s to high 50s for a CF in medical.
Yeah, that's good to know. And along those lines, Felicity, in terms of
Mhm.
specifically negotiating at a hospital, is this an area that we say negotiating may be something you can do for the pay rate?
So I don't think it's wrong to ask, Alan. I think most of the time when these positions come open, they're interviewing many people. And so it's how to, as you've said, how to kind of finesse those conversation topics that you definitely want somebody to know you're interested primarily in the job versus, right, the salary, because that's a lot of times what the expectation. And you've heard us talk about how privileged they think you are, right, to be able to work for them, even for free as an intern. So I wish I could say that there was more negotiation after you have your C's.
Yeah. And we'll talk about negotiation specifically here in a second in general, as far as kind of that being a skill set and how to go about that. But yeah, as you get more experience, then it's more possible. Other than school districts, right? In other words, school districts, the pay is the pay. Kind of
Mhm.
take it.
Yeah, and there's a question in the chat too about a number reference and what's common for schools in the Metroplex, and it really runs from the low 50s to the low 60s, depending on the district. So you just look at that. Alan already mentioned too that the actual pay is just part of it. The benefits are also a huge piece of
Mhm.
that. So that's generally what you'll find. And Aaron asked, most teachers are on the teacher pay scale. It depends again on the district. Some districts will
Mhm.
put a SLP on a teacher pay scale, but with a teacher with a master's degree, and then maybe a stipend for your maintaining your certification and license. Other districts put you on a separate pay scale, maybe with a school nurse or with an OT, etc. So it really depends on the school district. And there is not a whole lot of negotiation room, especially when you're first coming out. But if you're maybe moving into a school district from another setting, then you might have some more negotiation room.
Yeah. Okay. Perfect. And any other thoughts in terms of, we'll get into some other aspects, but home health, private practice, there's negotiating room there, correct?
Yes, I would
Yes,
say
I would say
yes.
that's probably the areas where, right, Jessica, maybe where there's more negotiation in private practice and home health.
I would agree because you're not working with, in general, very large corporations or organizations that already have specifics in mind. Um, but you keep in mind that they're going to be different because they might be per case or per visit or per evaluation rather than a salary. So it might look like a whole lot of money per hour or per 30 minutes, but you have to look at how that kind of plays out in the grand scheme of things. And I don't want to jump the gun because I think Alan probably has some more things to talk about related
No,
to
that's
this. Is that
Yes.
okay.
right?
That's fine. That's actually a great point, right? It can be a higher dollar amount per case, so to speak, or a salary position that's more consistent. So one looks like you can earn a whole lot more, but does it work out that way in the end?
Mhm.
Salary position is something that you can count on week after week. compared to something that varies.
Right.
So,
If you think about the freeze that we had a couple of weeks ago, if you work in home health, you're not seeing patients, so you're not getting paid. But if you're working at a school or a hospital or a place that has a salaried position, then you're probably getting paid. So
Mhm.
it really depends, and it works out. It means that you have to approach things a little bit differently and just kind of work out where it all plays out over time.
yeah, and where it fits into your lifestyle,
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
similar kind of in many areas where maybe you're a single person, and so you want that consistent salary. You know what your bills are, you know what your salary is. There are other people who need that flexibility, right, of private practice, and if they have to go a while without getting paid because winter storm comes in, maybe they're fine. Maybe they have a spouse that's making good money. So it kind of depends on where you are in your career at this stage in your life. So there's many aspects to kind of look at.
Mhm.
I agree. Yeah.
Okay,
It's
let's keep.
different for everyone.
Yeah, it is. It is. So let's look a little bit more at negotiating because it seems like something it's good to know, and there's probably would reach a point somewhere in your career where you might need to do this, right? Let's investigate that a little bit. So bear with me. The first part, what would you do with $50,000, right? Seems a little bit corny, but you do quite a bit with $50,000, right? So hold that in your head for a bit. Let's talk about negotiating. So the idea of negotiating again makes some people nervous. They don't want to appear greedy. They don't want to do it, right? They just want to be paid what's appropriate. And I get that. They might worry that people might look badly at them. But if you're moving into an area that negotiating is kind of expected, then you're going to miss out on salary if you don't negotiate, even if it's for just a small amount. So if that's the case, again, we kind of talked about school districts. If you're coming into it later, that could be different. But in general, the pay is the pay. But other aspects like a hospital, then it's more the norm. They're going to expect it. So let's just use this as an example. So say you start out at 4,000 lower than your friend because you did not network well and you don't really know what everybody's getting paid. And you find out later that you were 4 grand less, right? Then you both get a raise of 5% a year. So you're at 42,000. The friend's now at 46.2. Then you go back to normal raises, if we can even say this is normal, depends, 3%. So your salary is 44, theirs is 48.5. So that's a pretty significant difference right there. If you think about what you might do with what is that, $4,400 in a year. And I know it's taxed, but it would add up. So that difference over 10 years is roughly $50,000. And if you're looking at being in the workforce for, I don't know, 3, 4 decades at $50,000, 150, 200,000 plus the what that money would earn you, interest and such, it becomes huge. So that little bit of negotiating in the beginning, even if it's for what did we say? Was it 4 grand, 2 grand, something like that? $1,000, whatever it is, that will add up over time. So if we have the ability to negotiate, definitely this is something we want to do. So we want to research and gather the information from colleagues. I've got some other areas on here that will show you where you can do some research. And then you want to take your emotions out of the mix, right? This is just, it's business. Here's what the market is paying. Here's what this entity will pay you. And it doesn't mean this is what you're worth. You're maybe a really wonderful person who works hard, has all this knowledge, but this is early in your career. So you know what? You're not going to get paid a whole lot, but that won't be forever. So we want to gather those hard facts, data, speak with people, know what we're worth. Just like as Jessica was saying, low to high 50s at hospitals and 50s to 60s perhaps in a school district. So, okay, well, that gives me a guide. Then if I'm doing some informational interviewing and networking and I find out, I'm just going to make this up, I've got a contact at UT Southwest and they say, oh yeah, no, everybody, it says in the 50s, but really what happens is everybody comes in at a max of 52.5. Okay, well now I know 52.5, right? And then there's people who've spoken and said, you know, Baylor's different or UT Southwest is different. So we're going to gather as much information as we can so that we get there and feel comfortable. We're going to learn our target strategy, what it is that we would like. If we happen to know everyone comes in at 52.5 because that's all they're going to do, well, then that's maybe our target salary. Also, determine your minimum salary. So this, I think, is essential. This is kind of like, you know, an auction, a reverse auction, so to speak. You know, when they have auctions and somebody's selling something and they keep pointing it out and it's like, oh, $10 here, 20, 100, 50, you know, it just keeps going and going. Well, we kind of want to do the reverse and have a conversation. So let's just use that right there, that $50,000 range. What would be our lowest? Well, maybe for you, you'd say 50,000. That's it. That's as low as I'm going to go. Okay, that's fine. What if 49,000 was what you were offered and that was all you were going to get? Would you take it? Maybe you would to get this first job at wherever, Baylor, because they're not paying what we thought anymore. Okay, what about 48,000? Well, maybe that's where you draw the line. You say, no, I really want to be in the 50s. I think that's what I'm worth. I'll go as low as 49, but that is it. That is as low as I go. Okay, great. Now you know. Now you know your minimum salary. Make note of that. Write it down. Because that's something you want to reflect on because emotions get high when we get offered jobs. We don't want to accept them right at that second, if at all possible. And we want to know our minimum. Okay. So knowing your worth, again, there's a lot that goes into it. Our transferable skills, our competencies, our academic successes. Not everyone's completely equal, right? Everybody comes to the table with some different talents. Work, internship experience, leadership, what accomplishments we have. And sometimes we've got all of this, and it's amazing what we bring to the table. But my analogy before that we find out Baylor pays 52.5 and that's that. And you're there making the same exact salary initially as somebody who, you know, brings a lot less to the table. No offense to them, but they just do. Well, that might be the way this first job is going to go. Okay. But we're going to want to know what we're worth, what we bring to the table. It's also going to help us in the interview process because if we know what we bring to the table, we can speak to it. If we haven't thought about it and they ask us our strengths and why they should hire you, and you think, well, I don't know, because I have a degree in this because this is what I want to do, that's probably not adequate. We want to have some more competencies that we can bring to that table, to that discussion.
And we have another question. Oh, sorry, Jessica.
No, go for it, Felicity.
Yeah. So Amanda's asking if and I think we were going to talk about this too. If their offer is lower than our minimum required salary, would you recommend declining the offer then or waiting it out to see if they would consider raising it? So how you meet those, manage those maybe different offers, right?
Yeah, and I've got some quotes that we've got that I'll put up on the screen. But basically, if they're really low, probably like let's just say again in the 50s, and they offer 30, well, there's probably not much room to negotiate, right? But if it's a few thousand off, then we can probably negotiate for that. Did y'all have any other thoughts or anything you want to add on to that? Because we're going to look at it in a bit as well. Okay, we'll keep going and we'll get to that slide. Good question, though. So here are some ways to learn more about salary and benefits. Salary.com, Glassdoor, and then the ASHA.org, American Speech Language Hearing Association. So it's really just about, this is kind of your big network, right? Just to find out from people what's normal, what you can expect. And then again, and I keep putting it, you kind of get tired of hearing it, but your network, the more you're connected to your network, the more you will not be caught off guard. And this will definitely help. So your salary, I've discussed what is your minimum salary, what is your ideal, what is the norm out there. And big thing I want to really look at here is that your budget does not determine your salary or what you're worth, your expenses or what you'd like. This is just business. It's supply and demand. So the fact that you've got a lot of student loans, the organization that you're applying with, no offense, but they don't care about any of that. So you really want to kind of table that and think in terms of what's reasonable, what's ideal, what's my minimum. Now your budget, well, then that needs to work into what you're going to get paid. So consider some different benefits. Jessica kind of spoke to it a bit ago, but contract work versus salary, that contract work can be a high dollar amount maybe, but then when you have no work coming in, that's low, that's zero. So you went from high to zero real quick. It's kind of like zero to me is like getting an F in a class, right? You try and factor in a zero in your average of grades, well, it's going to take a lot of A's to get that zero, to disappear, right? So if you find yourself in a situation where contract work, but you need it more consistent, then a lower salary might be more of a benefit to you. And these are just some possibilities as far as popular benefits, signing bonuses, perhaps, good life insurance. What is the health, dental, vision insurance? So again, if you know people working there, they can talk about, oh, the insurance isn't bad. It's a high deductible, but it's pretty good. Or it's great insurance. We just have a copay. You're going to work for a university, and it might be, well, the salary is not so great, but the insurance is really good, right? Retirement matching. So maybe you're going to work for a hospital, and they have a certain salary, and they will match within your 401k maybe 4% to the first 4% you put in. Well, then that's an additional 4% that gets saved and compounded over time. Then the question becomes, when are you vested? So essentially what that means is, when is this money yours? So you work for a hospital and you're vested in 2 years. So that 4% of your pay that they put in, after 2 years, it's yours. You're fully vested and you get it. You get that money. So then you can quit and go somewhere else and take that. If you're not fully vested, you quit before that date. Again, in this example, I said 2 years. So then you're just leaving that money behind. And that might be something worth doing. That's a separate discussion. But if you have a much better position that comes along with a much higher pay rate, well, which is better, to stay, lose that job, and get the vested money, or move on to a better position that's going to pay more? Other entities like UTD, it's 5 years to be vested. That's a long time. So those are just some things that you want to consider in terms of what kind of matching, because that's real money. When are you vested? Perhaps you want to go on to additional schooling. So do they have tuition assistance, tuition reimbursement, any kind of continuing education? Because that all can play a factor. Some other benefits here, we have DART passes and such. A lot of times companies, when they're trying to hire you, will try and tell you all these things that they have. And they might be good or they might not be that valuable. DART passes are great if you live near the DART line and the company or the entity, the hospital, let's just say, is off the DART line. But if you live way out in the burbs and the DART's not accessible, then that's not such a great benefit to you. So kind of weighing each benefit, what they have, and deciding, is that good for me? So some others here: on-site medical care, cafeteria, flexible hours, A lot of those are really, again, I'm going to say it again, but through your network, if you know somebody working there and they can really speak to it and say, oh no, it's great. We've got flexible hours. There's a wonderful cafeteria, and it's just a really great place to work. Everybody gets along really well. Okay, well, that's a great benefit, so something else to really kind of think about. So, okay, I think this was the question earlier as far as strategizing your negotiation. So take your notes and information, including a prioritized list of what you want to negotiate for. So let's just say that you're offered a position, and it's one that, and this kind of falls under the multiple job offers. So sometimes when it rains, it pours. If you receive a job offer, one of the questions, ideally, you don't want to accept it right then, even if it's really everything you want. It's good to be able to just ask, say, thank you, I appreciate this offer. Is this something, can I have a couple days or a day to think about it and get back to you? Can I get back to you by 5 o'clock on Thursday? I just want to speak with my significant other. And this allows us to kind of calm down a little bit from the excitement and really think about what they're offering us. And is this really what I want, right? Is this the job that I want? Is this the pay range that I want? Are these benefits going to be adequate? And that's when we can also start to look at, okay, I know there's room to negotiate at this particular place. So how much am I going to negotiate? They offered me 50. And we discussed that at hospitals, 50, low 50s to high 50s. So then we might say, okay, well, that's, I really appreciate that offer. I was hoping to be, closer to, mid 50s. Is there room to negotiate? And if it's, then that's probably something they would be willing to speak about. So kind of having our strategy in mind, remaining positive and flexible. We're not battling them, right? We're just talking with them. It's business. We're negotiating, and we're going to keep it professional. So I've got some other quotes. I want to look at those as well. And I think that can kind of help. So deflecting. You might, and I wish this was illegal, but it's not. When you're in the job interview, before you're even ready, you haven't found enough out yet. What are your salary expectations for this job? And they're asking you. Well, so my answer is, you really don't want to answer this, but we don't want to say none of your business, right? So we're going to say something like, well, you know what? I'd really like to learn more about the role before I set my expectations, or I'd like to see if I'm a good fit for this role in the company before we discuss salary, if that's okay with you. So that's kind of a way of deflecting that. Can you share your salary history with me? Again, I wish this was illegal. It's no one's business. But here are some ways that we might be able to say it. You're going to have to figure out your way to say it. But, my previous jobs as a student were so very different from this role. Can we discuss what my duties will be here and then maybe discuss salary later? Or the other one here, perhaps you can make me an offer based on your budget for this role, and then we can discuss from there. I like the idea of saying something like, do you happen to have a budgetary range that you're working with? And then sometimes people are caught off guard and they'll say, yeah, I think we're paying, I don't know, somewhere in the 50s, 52 to like 58, something like that. At which point, if you know where you are hoping to be, you're hoping to be at 55, then your only reply to that needs to be, okay, thank you, I'm comfortable with that, right? So now they've given you their salary range instead of you giving them the salary range. Because the ridiculous game here is that he who or she who gives a number first loses. So you're trying to ideally have them give you the range as opposed to you telling them what you want to make. So kind of wanted to pause right there. Were there any thoughts or questions? Because that's kind of a big topic right there.
Mm-hmm. And we had one more question in the chat. It's someone's asking, if you start lower than expected and or failed the negotiation, can you negotiate again later? I think there were I think you might have hit on some of this already, Alan, but wanted to recognize the question.
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, kind of, I don't want to say for sure no, but pretty much when you start on with a company, especially a lot of companies or hospitals, they're small pay jumps. So unless you get a promotion, you're only getting percentages of that. But that's why it's so important to get what you're comfortable with up front, because they're probably not going to go back. They might. Some companies will look at it later and you've been there for 5 years. They say, oh, we need to do a salary adjustment because this person is way underpaid and we're going to give them $6,000 more a year. It can happen. It's more rare. It's definitely rare.
Yes, I will say that. Yeah, I think you answered it. That actually did happen in the medical world, in the excuse me, in the Metroplex. In the last 10 years, they did a salary adjustment in some of the bigger systems, and so, but rare. I don't recall that happening before then or since.
Right. And the deal is when they do it, it's because they feel they have to and they feel they're forced into it and they waited too long to do it. And just like that $50,000, what would you do with 50,000? By the time you get it, you're going to have missed out on quite a bit. So it's great that you're getting it. It's just, it's far better to get it up front when you start. Let me see if I have anything else here. If you can't deflect the salary questions, try to get the employer to share their range. Yeah, like I gave before, ideally, you want them to give the range. And just remember, we're trying to keep it friendly. We're not battling. This is somebody we hope to work with, but we're just doing business. So persuading, as far as salary negotiation, if we have to, because there are some people who are going to be very much hardcore about this that you're interviewing with. When you even give your best little dance about, well, I'd like to fit into your salary range. You have one you're working with. What if they just say, yeah, we do. So what do you need to get paid? Well, they're in the driver's seat if we want this job. So then we want to have some things to say, right? So based on my research, 55 to 60 per year, do you have room to negotiate? That kind of thing. I'm excited to receive an offer and would love to join your team. With my qualifications, experience, here's what I'm thinking, what flexibility do you have? So we're just trying to be open as possible. And I think that's what's kind of challenge with this, is that I'm speaking about it, but the truth of the matter is you might have 5 interviews with 5 different companies or groups, and they handle it 5 different ways. And so it's not like a script, where I say they say this and you say that and we jump back and forth. It's a conversation. And so based on what I put up here in the last couple slides, that's what you would keep in mind and kind of practice. But we can't predict what somebody's going to say in an interview. So get it in writing. I think this is fairly standard in that, especially like say a school system, school district, at a certain point, they're sending out to you exactly what the offer is. And any kind of job, they're going to send you in writing. Here's what we're offering you. We're going to thank the employer for the offer, ask for the offer, again, in writing, and be sure to just kind of read it over. Make sure this is exactly what you're wanting.
I will add to this, because when you graduate, you won't be licensed yet until you are, a couple of weeks past graduation. There are a lot of times restrictions, and places cannot formally offer you a position until you are qualified. So there are many times where you might be offered a position or given an offer letter that just says, we intend to offer you a position once you have received your license. That's kind of the organization's way of getting around, I can't technically offer you a job until you have a speech pathology or intern license. So it is not uncommon to not sign things, especially when you're just graduating until a little bit later. So, for example, if you're starting at a school in the fall and you graduate in the spring, you may not actually sign paperwork, even though you have been um, given an indication of an offer or a letter that says we plan to offer you this position. You may not sign anything until the summer when you have actually been licensed, because they can't hire you because you're not credentialed yet for that position, if that makes sense.
Yeah, thank you. That is and I know we'd spoken about that before. That is definitely good to know. And I think, Jessica, as you're saying that, that can kind of come through the conversations that you're having with them, because this isn't the
Mhm.
first time that they've dealt with it, right? And I think when you're talking with people, you kind of get a comfort level, right? That, okay, I feel good. They will eventually send me that offer letter in writing,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah, perfect. And I think that might actually, I'll come to that in a second, but essentially it kind of falls under, yeah, we're right here. If you feel less than confident or it seems too risky, you can stop the discussion, right? So you're discussing with them and you're realizing the offer is going to come at a certain point. Here's why. But if you're feeling like there's just a lot missing, there's something not right, right? This is part of speaking with other people, knowing ahead of time and trusting your instincts as far as maybe this isn't the right place for me, maybe I'm going to hold out for something else instead of taking this job. Okay, so that is it for the slides, but we definitely luckily still have time. So let me remove this. That way I can go back to the camera. Okay. So I know we were kind of asking questions as we went, and Felicity and Jessica, maybe you've had some other ones that you didn't quite ask yet that went by, but what thoughts or questions do you all have?
So
Camera, there we
much.
go.
Such good information. It's an important topic for many people at this moment.
It
Did
is.
we? I was thinking about the balancing of the multiple offers. Did we feel like?
Balancing in multiple offers. So, okay, we
Mhm.
can kind of, I don't know if we spoke about it enough. Um, so that's part of our hopefully asking if we can, wait a couple days to come back and
Okay.
give them a response. Um, because it's also giving us time. Perhaps there's one job we're really hoping for, but we can't delay it for too long before we give
Okay.
an offer, before we say yes or no. So that kind of comes into, is this in the ballpark? This is a good salary. I'm willing to take it. It's the
Mm.
next day. I've agreed to it. Then it comes into, and I know we discussed this before, it can be a small world, right? So
Mhm.
if you accept a job at a hospital, right, and this person is the manager you're going to work with, if I'm going to work with Jessica and we're all excited, I'm going to start in 2 weeks, right, or whenever it is. And then suddenly that dream job comes in at Baylor, the better hospital than what Jessica works at. Now I'm going to go back and burn a bridge with Jessica and say, oh, sorry, I got a better offer. I'm not going to be there.
Mhm.
Well, Jessica might very well remember that.
Mhm.
And guess what? 5 years from now, all of a sudden I'm looking for another job. And Jessica's like, oh no, I remember Alan. Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
not hiring him. And, she'll kind of almost take pleasure in the fact that she's
Mhm.
not even going to interview you. I remember you.
Mhm.
So, multiple job offers, we have to it's tricky. We have to be really cognizant of just knowing what is our worth? What are we willing to accept?
Mhm.
That being said, I think it can be a little bit different at school districts. I think we discussed that it can be something that you turn down at a certain point. But even that, I'm always leery just to kind of remain. We want to be professional. We don't want the word out that we're not, right?
Mhm.
So that's kind of my answer for multiple job offers. At the same time, you're in a good position because you're getting a lot of them apparently. But there's a limited window of what you can do.
Alan, there's another question in the chat, and it says, well, there's one that I'll answer for Rebecca, but the other
Okay.
one is from April, and it says, what is a polite way to turn down an offer?
Yeah, that's good. So let's just say that, you were going to need at least 50,000 and they're sending you 35,000. It's so ridiculous, right?
Mhm.
You're still very happy essentially that they offered it to you, or at least you're going to act that way. And you're just going to say, you know what, I really do, after much consideration, as you're getting back to them the next day, because you didn't answer them right away, right? You got back to them the next day and you just basically say, I really do appreciate the offer. I just think that's a little bit lower than the salary I'm comfortable with. So while I really appreciate the offer and would love to work there, I'm sadly going to have to decline, but I really want to thank you for your time and thank you for at least considering me. That's how I would do it, because that same hiring manager might be somewhere else at a different hospital and appreciate that you're professional with them because their hands were maybe tied. It wasn't personal. So that would be how I would do it.
Okay. Great example.
See a hand, Mary?
Yes. Yeah, I was thinking, is it possible to renegotiate salary once you're, for example, like a few years into a job? Like supposing you realize that you're maybe not being paid as much as you would like to, or, compared to other coworkers, that kind of thing? Or is that not really a thing that happens?
So renegotiate, you broke up at the beginning, but yeah, so I think we kind of touched on it, that it's more rare. It can happen, but essentially once you're at a position, they kind of feel like you're there and they don't really have to. So it's not that it's impossible. It might happen and they might do salary hikes for a lot of people. I just really would not count on that, I think, is my biggest official answer. Don't count on it. Try your best to get what you're comfortable with going in. And if it turns out the industry is really switched and that hospital says, uh-oh, we've got to really look at all these salaries and they hike everybody up, then great. So it's possible, but I would not be holding my breath for that.
Right. Thanks.
Thanks, Felicity. Yeah, I've seen that happen. Felicity mentioned that she saw that one time. I've seen that happen once in the schools. While I was in the schools, they did a big adjustment across the board. So, but it's, I worked in the schools for 10 years and it happened once. So, yeah, you are excited when it happens, but a lot of times the way that you move up the ladder of money is by switching jobs. And you have to weigh what really is the most important thing for you, because there's a lot more to a job than the money. Flexibility of schedule, time off, benefits. A lot of times people with young families like to work in the schools because you get summers off and you don't have to worry about childcare in the summers. A lot of times people want to work in a hospital, at different points in their lives because they they can deal with the rigors at the hospital, but you might not later. You might go to skilled nursing facility because it's very flexible. It just depends. So there's so much more than just that salary piece that weighs into what makes a job a good job, and it's different for every person. So if you're thinking, oh, I need to make more money, weigh everything together before jumping ship to someplace else, because there are so many factors that play into making a position a good one.
Yeah. And along that, I've got two thoughts. One is that there's an idea that, and I kind of agree with it, sometimes you don't work for the entity or the hospital, you work for your boss, right? And so that can make all the difference in the world. An excellent boss, an excellent manager, excellent teammates, compared to horrible teammates, horrible boss, but a great, employer. Your networking is going to help tell you that. And then as far as salary, I just had an example. UTD was grossly underpaying. And so they were looking at salary hikes for everybody and they were investigating. And this was going on for at least a couple years. we were close to we were literally really close to hearing the end result, and then COVID hit. And now the official answer is, well, we'll have to relook at that later because now we don't know. So if you were here for many years waiting on that salary to suddenly hike up, is it going to happen? Don't know, right? So again, but if you came in at the salary you were comfortable with, then you're good. So.
There's another question from Amanda, and she's asking, does the school pay based on the school year or the calendar year? So school's based on a school year, so they'll pay for like the 2021 school year. So if you started in like January of 2021, you're going to be paid on the 2021 school year. Now you can choose to be paid for just that 10 months, or you can choose for them to spread it out over 12 months. And that part you have a choice about in schools, how you want them to disperse your salary, whether you want a paycheck in the summer or not. You're not going to be paid for those summer months, but they're just going to spread it out, but you're paid on the school year.
That's a great question, especially for people, because I know different teachers. If you're good at budgeting, some people will take the money up front. Others, I have a brother-in-law, nope, year-round paychecks is what he needs because that's the only way he's going to get from paycheck to paycheck. Mm-hmm. So you just need to know yourself with that too.
Yep. Do we have any other questions?
Is that maybe?
Let's see. I guess so. Jessica Peterson, are you on to give us a quick announcement about the next meeting and to thank Alan? First, everyone, I would just really say thank you, Alan, for this. This has been very helpful. Lots of really good, important discussions. So we really, really appreciate your coming and putting this together. So thank you, and hope we can do this again sometime.
Absolutely. This is just the beginning of the discussion, really. It doesn't end here. This is a big discussion. So good. I'm glad everyone was here.
And hopefully you guys will keep the Career Center in mind when you're thinking about your needs as students and what, especially when it comes to resumes and interviewing and that sort of thing. So I'll let Jessica close us out.
Sounds great. Thank you. I'm the NISHLA secretary, and I would just like to second Jessica's thank you to Alan Knox. There's also a lot of thank yous in the comment section. I don't know if you can see that as well, Alan, but we really appreciate it. That was some great information. Also, thank you to our NISHLA members for coming to this event. And I'd like to just tell you about 2 upcoming things that are about to happen. First of all, we have our t-shirt orders in. And so if you ordered a t-shirt, those are located in Jessica Carter's office. That's over at Collier in Dallas. And they have your names on them. If you want to order a t-shirt, we do have extras. So just give one of the NISHLA officers an email. And then our second announcement is that on March 23rd at 7 o'clock, so that's the Tuesday following spring break, we are going to have a CF panel. So we're going to have 3 SLPs tell us about their experience during their CF year. We have 2 of them who are in a medical placement. Either we have someone in an acute center and also someone else who is in outpatient. And we have 1 other CF who is in the school setting. So we look forward to seeing you there. Thank you again for coming. And yeah, so it was a great event. So thank you and have a beautiful week.